Hello everybody. I am really excited to share today's video with you because I had a lot of fun with this little experiment and I've got some really interesting results to share with you. So as a bit of a summary, ever since my all-time favorite seedling fertilizer was discontinued, I've been on the hunt for a new favorite. So I set up this experiment to test 9 different fertilizers and 1 control to see which one gave me the healthiest, most robust, best looking seedlings. Now to skip over all of the details of my experiment and go straight to the results, I do have the chapters marked in the video description below, so you can skip straight to the results chapter if you like. But I do hope you'll stick around for the whole experiment. So first, let me give you some detail as to how I set this experiment up. As I said, I selected 9 fertilizers, well, technically 8 fertilizers and 1 biostimulant, plus a control, which was just water, to test. I wanted to grow in a medium which had little to no inherent nutritional value, so I went with coconut coir. I sowed 2 50-cell trays, so 100 cells in total, on January 10th, with my 9 tests plus 1 control. That allowed for 10 cells devoted to each test. I used the same variety of hybrid cauliflower for everything, choosing cauliflower because it's notoriously finicky, and sowed 2 seeds per cell. All of the seedlings were up by January 16th, and on January 20th, I thinned the seedlings to 1 per cell. For the most part, and I'll cover the exceptions in more detail later, I fed the seedlings with the amount indicated on the labeling. I also tried to feed at the frequency listed on the label if there was one. For most fertilizers, that was about every 2 weeks. Their first feeding was on February 5th, and I tried to aim for right around 2 weeks apart on the feedings, though I didn't quite end up on that schedule. The second feeding was on February 20th, and the third on March 13th. The exception to this schedule being the Job's granular food, where I skipped the middle feeding because the plants just did not look like they needed it, and really the instructions only indicated to use this one once. I also used the total biome 1 time a week as the label instructed. When I fed the plants, I wanted to avoid any risk of cross-contamination, for lack of a better term. So when I fed them, I separated each of them out from the rest of the trays and fed and watered, then allowed them to sit in the runoff to soak up whatever they could. I then moved them to a separate tray to finish draining. I used any liquid runoff to feed my houseplants, rinsed off the trays, containers, and utensils, and started on the next fertilizer. Now I tried to kind of keep notes and jot down some thoughts that I had during this testing process. And the first was that the selection for the fertilizers was a bit random. But I wanted to get a variety of fertilizers with different ingredients, as well as using some which I had on hand already, and some that had been recommended to me. Different ratios of NPK in each fertilizer will likely affect my results. For example, the lowest is the Fox Farms food, which is a 0.5-0.7 ratio, and the highest is the Miracle Grow at 4-12-4. Now you could alter these and make them closer to equal by adding more or less fertilizer into the water if desired, but I wanted to go with the manufacturer's listed application rate. Also, in some cases where I could see that the seedlings just weren't putting on growth, normally if I were growing these for transplant to the garden, I would up the frequency of application to once a week. But for the sake of experimentation, I didn't do this because I wanted to follow the manufacturer's instructions as closely as I could and apply them at relatively similar rates. Now, as of filming this video, it is March 16th, and these seedlings are actually a couple weeks older than the age I would typically transplant cauliflower seedlings at. I usually aim for transplanting cauliflower seedlings, which are right around a month and a half old. These are over 2 months old. But it's been too cold to transplant out. I started these early just for the purpose of this test. And I do really feel like this gives a clear picture of seedling health. Now, like I said, it's a little early, but if the weather cooperates and I'm able to transplant these out, I would love to continue this test, transplanting these out in the garden and following them all season. So if that happens, I'll let you know. But this in itself gives me some really good results. So let's jump into the specifics of the fertilizers fertilizers that I used. First, of course, I had the control, which was water only, no fertilizer. Next up was Rev Organic Growth Stimulant. The ingredients on this one are 100% organic humic compounds. Now, of note, Rev is not technically a fertilizer, but rather a growth stimulant. The idea being that this is rich in humic acids, which in turn are rich in microbes, which in turn help increase nutrient uptake in plants. It does say right on the label that for even better results, this should be applied with a fertilizer. And since I started with a growing medium that doesn't have any nutrients to uptake, the results on this one, which I'll cover in a minute, really don't surprise me. But I'm not going to spend money on two separate products to feed my seedlings, so I really wanted to see how this would do as a standalone. Now, I'm always personally interested in how these things smell, so I'm going to review that and let you guys know. This one is interesting. I'd say just a fairly strong, earthy mineral smell, which is what I would expect. Next up is the AgroThrive Organic Fruit and Flower Liquid Fertilizer. Now, this is marketed as a fast-acting biofertilizer, and it is derived from corn steep liquor, and I was not sure what that was, so I had to look it up, and it is a byproduct of the corn wet milling process. It's rich in amino acids and vitamins and minerals. This fertilizer also contains fermented fish byproducts and sulfate of potash. Now, smell notes. That's oddly pleasant. It has a really rich, almost molasses kind of soy sauce. I know umami is a flavor, not a smell, but that's what it calls to mind. That's, like I said, actually fairly pleasant for a fertilizer, especially one that contains fish products. Next, we have the Espoma Organic Grow All-Purpose Plant Food. The ingredients on this one are hydrolyzed poultry manure, hydrolyzed soy protein, hydrolyzed fish protein, bone meal, and kelp extract. It also contains non-plant food ingredients, including a lot of beneficial microbes, humic acid, dextrose, sucrose, and maltodextrin. So smell notes on this one. This is a fertilizer that I've already used and had on hand. And when I first got this and smelled it, I was surprised by how not gross it smelled. It smelled weirdly perfumey. Sorry. But the longer this sits, the worse it gets. So the perfume smell is still there, but underneath that perfume, it smells exactly what you would expect poultry manure and fish to smell like. So it's pretty gross. The good thing is once it's diluted and watered into the plants, you don't smell it at all. Next, we have Dr. Earth Root Zone Starter Plant Food. And this one is made from digested food materials and digested food byproducts. And smell notes here, relatively similar to the AgroThrive, kind of that soy sauce, molasses, maybe a little sweeter, not unpleasant. I also use Super Thrive plant food, and this is one that I have used outdoors with good results. I've been hesitant to use it indoors on my indoor seedlings because this is a fish fertilizer, so it's derived from fish solubles, which are stabilized with sulfuric acid, and accordingly, it smells like fish. I mean, it has a very potent odor, and I really didn't want to stink up my whole house. But I have, again, been pleasantly surprised once this is diluted and watered in the small amount that I'm using. Really no, detectable stinky odor in my seed starting room. So that's a plus. Next up is the Miracle-Gro Quick Start Planting and Transplant Starting Solution. And this one is a synthetic fertilizer derived from ammonium phosphate, potassium phosphate, and urea. And I've gotten a little grief on social media after I shared a post about this experiment stating that this was indeed one of the fertilizers that I was using, which I kind of expected. And I would not normally ever use Miracle-Gro on any of my plants. I'm just not a fan of these synthetic formulations, but I felt like to have a truly well-rounded, complete test, I needed at least one synthetic fertilizer in the mix. So went with Miracle-Gro because it's probably the best known one. I also use Total Biome Organic Plant Food for vegetables. And this was not a brand or a fertilizer I was familiar with. I found this after just searching for a molasses-based fertilizer on Amazon. And just a little bit of a backstory rant here. So I ordered this product, got it at home, gave it a good whiff. It smells honestly like straight molasses. So I was like, oh yeah, this will work great. Oh, look, and it's got ants all over it just from sitting out here overnight in the greenhouse. They love the molasses. I followed the very minimal application instructions on the bottle when I started using this. Only in preparation a couple days ago for this video did I happen to go back out to Amazon, look this product up, and realized that the ingredient list on Amazon and the directions were different from what's on the bottle, which is nothing, and what I remembered them being when I ordered, which was molasses. So first of all, the application instructions on the bottle are missing what I'm assuming is an important part, which is that you actually mix this into water, wait 15 to 30 minutes for the microbes to activate, and then water your plants with it. So I didn't do that when I used this product because it doesn't say it on the label. The other issue is that the ingredients listed on Amazon were not the same as what I remember this being when I ordered it. So the ingredients on Amazon, which there are no ingredients listed on this label, are yeast extract, soluble hemoglobin, which if anybody has heard of that in a fertilizer before, tell me about it. That's new to me. Activated charcoal and additional enzymes extracted from broths of fermentation, as well as enzymes, microbials, and urea. I headed over to the Total Biome site where this particular product also does not have any information under it. There's a similar product that has those same ingredients that I saw on Amazon. I don't know if these are in fact the same thing, if this is something different. The other thing that's really weird about this is it is a fertilizer. It's labeled as a fertilizer right on the label, but there is no grade or guaranteed analysis listed on here. And that's that information you typically see on fertilizers that's like a ratio like 4:4:4. And then it's got a breakdown of all of the sources of nitrogen and potassium and phosphate, etc. Not having that on something that's labeled as a fertilizer is against labeling rules. So I think that seems pretty sketchy to me to start off with. So I know that's a lot of excess information, a bit of a rant there, but maybe just to serve as a warning against buying things off of Amazon that you're not real familiar with, which I typically know better. I just got suckered in on my hunt for molasses fertilizer. So take that as you will. We've also got what seems to be the crowd favorite, Fox Farms. I've heard from a lot of you that really like this brand, and they do have a lot of good stuff. So this is their liquid plant food big bloom concentrate. And what interested me about this one is that it is derived from earthworm castings, which is a favorite ingredient of mine, bat and seabird guano, rock phosphate, sulfate of potash, and kelp. So I honestly expected big things from this. And smell notes on this one. Very, very little detectable smell to that whatsoever, which kind of surprises me. And finally, I've got one granular fertilizer in the mix here. This is Job's Organics Fast Start Granular Plant Food. And I just wanted to try out one granular formulation. I didn't exactly follow the directions on this one. The label actually says to mix this into the soil before planting. And what I did was end up sprinkling some of the granules on the top of the soil in each cell and then watered it in after my seedlings had already germinated. I used about 1/8 of a teaspoon per cell, and I fed with this one only twice. I kind of skipped the middle feeding that I did with a lot of the other fertilizers because the plants just did not look like they needed it, and because this one's technically only meant to be applied once. And this fertilizer is derived from feather meal, bone meal, processed poultry manure, and sulfate of potash. It also includes a mix of Job's proprietary beneficial microorganisms called biosome. And smell notes on this one. I'm definitely getting hints of poultry in that. It's pretty gross. But again, once this was applied and watered in, I really didn't notice a smell. Okay, at last, the part that I'm sure you have all been waiting for, the results. And I'm really excited about this too, because while I've been able to watch the top growth on these all along, this is the first time I'm getting a look at the root development, which is the really, really important part of this picture. So let's go in order of seedling appearance to start with, from best to worst. So first up, the best looking batch of seedlings. This is the group that was fed with the AgroThrive fertilizer. And these are just everything I could possibly want cauliflower seedlings to look like. They're big, robust, nice sturdy stems, good color, no sign of nutrient deficiencies here. These are just beautiful. And I will point out here too, I know I've heard from some of you that get a little worried because you see the bottom leaves of your brassicas doing this, and this is totally normal for them to drop that first set of primary leaves as the seedlings mature. So you'll see that on most of these plants if they haven't dropped off already. So that is completely normal. No need to worry about that. But those are just some beautiful seedlings. Now for the true test here, let's take a look at the root development. And nice. That is just, hopefully you can get a clear picture of that. Those, like I said, they've been in about 2 weeks longer than I'd like. So we're starting to get a little pot bound circling, which that is not good for cauliflower in particular. They're really sensitive to transplant shock, but excellent root development here. Really healthy. I'm just really happy with the results on this one. Coming in at number 2 were the Dr. Earth fed plants. You can see here, he's getting a little droopy. It's warm out here in this greenhouse, and these probably need watered again today. As these seedlings get big, they really soak up the water quickly. So instead of watering once a week, I'm watering like every other day. So they definitely need to be transplanted out of here. But droopiness aside, again, big, beautiful plants, nice color, nice sturdy stems. Let's take a look at that root development. Nice, same. Very similar to the AgroThrive. That is nice root development. Again, a little over with the roots starting to circle around the bottom of the pot there, but I will take it. Now in third place, I actually ended up with a tie between the Job's granular fertilizer here and the Super Thrive here. You can see, hopefully these seedlings are very close to the same size, the same color, the same stature, and everything. There's really nothing wrong with these. They're just not quite as healthy looking as I'd like. You can see there's a little bit of discoloration starting to happen here. This can be indicative of a slight nutrient deficiency. I think if I had gotten these transplanted out a week or 2 ago, I would not be seeing this at this point. It's likely because they've sat in these cells for this long. Again, nothing particularly wrong with these, just not as nice as the Dr. Earth and the AgroThrive. And not quite as many feeder roots on these seedlings either. Let's check out, that was the Job's. Let's check out the Super Thrive here. Yeah. Not as much root development on these guys, especially the Super Thrive here. So a fine option, but certainly not my first choice. And in fourth place, we've got the Rev, which again is a biostimulant, not technically a fertilizer. You can see how much smaller these guys are. Now, had this been planted in something like my normal seed starting mix that has a little fertility in it with the earthworm castings and such, these probably would have fared much better. And certainly with an additional fertilizer, as the manufacturer recommends, I would have expected these to do really, really well, possibly even win. But as it stands, they're okay. They're not great. Their color's okay. You can see this is what I was talking about them dropping that first set of primary leaves. But let's check out root development here. And really, these have about as much root development as the Super Thrive fertilizer did. Now in fifth, we've actually got a 3-way tie. Our control, and that was water only. The total biome, which I had a trick judging this because I wasn't sure whether to go with the biggest seedlings or the smallest, so I just cut the difference and figured the medium-sized seedlings were about the same size as these others. And then the Fox Farms. So with these, if I'm feeding my seedlings and they're not performing any better than me just watering them with plain water, I'm really not happy. I'm throwing away my money at this point. But let's look at the root development. So first our control, and you can see less development here, not enough even to hold this batch of core together. Root development on the total biome. Is that even less? Oops, I lost half my root. No, it's about the same. as the control. There are just not enough roots here for plants that are 2 months old. And then finally, whoops, we lost a chunk of dirt there too. This is the Fox Farms. And again, just not as much development as I'd like to see with these at the age they are. And the last two here, these were big shockers to me. So this is Espoma coming in at 6th place. And this, this has been really baffling to me. You can see some of these seedlings got a nice size to them, but look at how bad some of these look. This is not damping off because you can see that place where the stem meets the soil line is perfectly intact, perfectly solid. There's no signs of deterioration, rot, softness there. I will get into a little bit more of what I think is going on in just a moment, but let's take a look at these roots. And I'm going to look at 2 of the roots here. First, this big plant. Oh my, there's not even enough there to hold any of that root ball together. No wonder these plants are struggling. And let's look at, if I can even get that guy out of there. There's not much to, oh, no. I can't. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, just given what these roots look like, the plant, I'm surprised the plants even look as good as they do. That's pretty pathetic. It's also very surprising. I've used other Espoma products with good results. Wow, okay. And in last place here, Miracle Grow. Let's see if I can get some roots out of here. Okay, and again, there's just nothing. That's really sad. Okay, so let's talk about these. So I have some thoughts here after seeing the whole picture on these seedlings. The winners really don't surprise me. And I also think this shows a great visual of why it can be so important to actually feed your seedlings. As you can imagine, we are taking these seedlings out, putting them out into the garden. Some of these more well-developed plants with the better developed root systems are going to have a lot better chance of dealing with the stressors of that whole transplant process, as well as any ups and downs in temperatures, than a smaller, underdeveloped, in particular, root system is going to have. The big shock to me here was just how poorly some of these did. And I will admit, I was secretly delighted when my Miracle Grow sample started to go downhill. As I mentioned, I'm not a fan of synthetic fertilizers, but I was actually worried when I set up this experiment that the Miracle Grow seedlings might end up looking better than everything else, and I would kind of have to eat humble pie. But I honestly did not expect these to do this poorly. The Espoma results really, really shocked me as well. Now, I will admit, I am not an expert on reading plants when it comes to a lot of the nutritional deficiencies. So usually nitrogen is pretty easy to tell. I get a little hung up when it comes to some of the other nutrients. So in the case of these seedlings, I'm theorizing at best. I'm going to dig into this further and see if I can come up with a really concrete explanation as to what is happening here, but these are just kind of my initial thoughts on the matter. So when my Miracle Grow batch started to go downhill, my very first thought was fertilizer burn, because Miracle Grow is somewhat notorious for its capability to cause burn, especially when you use too much of it. But at this point, this does not look like fertilizer burn to me. I would have expected these to be a lot crispier if that were the case. So there's a couple of things I'm pondering on here. The first is that coconut coir can actually contain levels of salt which can be detrimental to plants. This is the reason that some manufacturers recommend a buffering and rinsing process prior to using. However, I've never had any problems with this particular brand that I used for the experiment. But what I'm wondering in the case of the Miracle Grow is perhaps that combination of fertilizer salts and the small amount of salt that may have been in the coir was just enough to inhibit some of the nutrient uptake. I also recently ran across information stating that core can actually inhibit the uptake specifically of calcium, magnesium, and iron. And I'm wondering again here if there's something about the Miracle-Gro and even the Espoma that when combined with that core just did not work well. Now the Espoma batch looks to me like I could potentially have a potassium and or calcium deficiency along with potentially some other nutrient uptake issues. I'm basing this off of one of the better visuals that I've found online for brassica nutrient deficiencies. I'll share a link to that in the description below because it's actually really handy for a lot of reasons, but pop it up here on the screen so you can see as well. But I'm also really interested to repeat this test using a growing medium other than core to see if my results change. Now, I'm also planning on replicating this or doing a very similar experiment with another crop. I'm thinking tomatoes at this point in the year, just to see how the results again change. I think with tomatoes, they're not nearly as finicky. They have different nutrient requirements. It could be really interesting results. I also highly encourage everyone to do a similar type of test if you're able. Maybe not with 100 cauliflower plants, but maybe try just 3 different pots of tomatoes with different fertilizers and see which one works well for you. I mean, here I spent a fair amount of money on all these different fertilizers, but I feel like long run, this was worth it to me because now I know what is really worth me spending my money on going forward versus wasting money on fertilizers that don't give me a better results than just watering my seedlings would. Now, if you have a specific fertilizer you'd like to see tested in a future experiment like this, drop a line in the comments below. And I know a lot of you want to see Neptune's harvest for sure. And if you found today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.